There is a particular kind of cruelty in being extraordinary and not knowing it, in carrying a gift so rare that even the people who are supposed to spot talent completely miss it, at least for a few seconds, because they cannot see past what is standing in front of them. That is exactly the position Jonathan Antoine found himself in on a March evening in 2012, when he walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage at 17 years old and changed the course of his own life forever. But the story of what happened next, and everything that came before and after that moment, is far richer, far more painful, and far more human than most people realize. To understand Jonathan Antoine, you have to start not on a stage, but in a school corridor. Jonathan Antoine was born on the 13th of January, 1995, in Goodmayes, Essex, to a police inspector father and a mother who would later become his manager. He grew up with his older sister Charlotte in a supportive family environment that encouraged his creative pursuits, displaying from a young age tendencies beyond just music, enjoying painting, drawing, and harboring ambitions of becoming a writer. By all accounts, he was a sensitive, imaginative child. And sensitive, imaginative children in ordinary schools can have a very hard time. His childhood was marked by significant challenges, including bullying related to his size that began in primary school and persisted into his teenage years. This was not the mild social awkwardness that most of us look back on with a vague wince. This was sustained, relentless torment that shaped the way Jonathan understood himself and his place in the world. He turned to the two things that gave him comfort: food and music. One would become his struggle. The other would become his salvation. At the age of 11, Jonathan enrolled at West Hatch High School in Chigwell and met singing coach Jenny Ewington and head of music Jeanette Brown. He later recalled beginning lessons with Ewington and simply taking to it. What happened next followed its own quiet logic. A boy who had been made to feel invisible suddenly had something that made rooms fall silent. The students at West Hatch began quietly referring to him as the boy with the incredible voice. Brown encouraged him into concerts, singing specifically to help him overcome his shyness. And gradually, something began to shift inside him. After Jonathan's voice broke around the age of 13, Ewington selected Bring Him Home from Les Miserables for him to perform at the 2010 Stratford and East London Music Festival, where he was named Young Musician of the Year. He was 15 when he won that award. The following year, he sang Ave Maria at the Royal Festival Hall in London as part of the Rotary Youth Makes Music event. For a teenager who had spent years being mocked, performing at one of London's most iconic concert venues was a moment of quiet vindication. At 14, Jonathan had auditioned for a junior place at the 4 major music conservatories in London. After being accepted at all of them, he chose the Royal Academy of Music. Read that again. Accepted by all 4. He chose the Royal Academy. It was also at West Hatch that Jonathan first met Charlotte Jaconelli. Their head of music, Jeanette Tomlinson, chose A Prayer, originally performed by Andrea Bocelli and Celine Dion, which they sang for their GCSE and also at their teacher's church wedding ceremony in 2011. That wedding performance, private and unplanned as a career launchpad, was where the duo Jonathan and Charlotte truly began. An audition video of the duo was sent to Britain's Got Talent in 2012. Neither of them could have guessed what was about to happen. Their first Britain's Got Talent performance was in the Series 6 audition held in London, aired on the 24th of March, 2012. Jonathan was 17. Charlotte was 16. When they walked onto that stage, the silence that greeted them was not respectful anticipation. It was a particular silence of an audience bracing for embarrassment. Simon Cowell, who has built an entire career on reading acts before they open their mouths, made a comment that barely disguised his skepticism. The judges looked on with the polite patience people reserve for things they expect to get through quickly. Then Jonathan opened his mouth. He delivered a breathtaking rendition of the prayer, showcasing his finely honed classical voice, and Simon Cowell lavished praise on performance, drawing a parallel between Jonathan and illustrious tenor Luciano Pavarotti. The audience erupted. Amanda Holden's expression went from courteous to thunderstruck in the space of a single phrase. A standing ovation followed before the duo had even finished. The clip spread across the internet immediately, racking up millions of views within days and drawing news coverage from around the world. Jonathan Antoine, the bullied teenager from Essex, had become an overnight international sensation. But even in that moment of triumph, there was complication. During the audition itself, Cowell publicly suggested that Jonathan should consider going solo and that Charlotte might be holding him back. It was an extraordinary thing to say on national television to two teenagers who were best friends, and it planted a seed that would take 2 years to fully grow. They participated in the semi-final on the 7th of May, 2012, performing Caruso by Lucio Dalla. The judges were effusive. Alicia Dixon told the duo that their friendship created a special chemistry she could feel in every part of her body when Jonathan sang. They made it to the final, performed the prayer again to another standing ovation, and the consensus across the country seemed to be that they were going to win. They did not. They finished as runners-up in the 6th series of Britain's Got Talent, beaten by dancing dog act Ashley and Pudsey. Jonathan later reflected on this with a thoughtfulness that belied his age, saying that when he considered the matter, Ashley and Pudsey's mission around animals probably meant they would do more responsible things with the win than he ever would, and that remembering everyone who finishes above or below you is made of the same stuff, flesh, blood, and electricity, was exactly how he kept himself from sinking into depression. It turned out that coming second was not the catastrophe it appeared. The day after the final, Simon Cowell was in negotiation to offer him a record deal, and it was confirmed they had signed a £1 million contract with his Psycho label. Their debut album, Together, was released on the 24th of September 2012 in the UK. A documentary following the young teenager's success was aired on ITV in November 2012, focusing on how they rose to fame and including tours of Italy and France as a kind of finishing school for the young artists. The fairy tale appeared to be running exactly on schedule. Their second album, Perhaps Love, was released in October 2013, described as an album of covers that also contained classical songs and interpretations of modern songs. Notably, it included solo tracks from each of them, a structural hint, visible in retrospect, that two individual artistic identities were beginning to pull in separate directions. Jonathan was drawn to classical opera. Charlotte's instincts leaned toward musical theater. Neither direction was wrong. They simply pointed in opposite ways. In February 2014, Jonathan Antoine and Charlotte Jaconelli, who had sold more than 250,000 albums as a duo, announced they were splitting up after both were offered individual deals by Sony Classical. Their joint statement read that they had had the most exciting journey together since meeting at West Hatch High School in 2006, that coming second on BGT and selling over 250,000 albums had been beyond their wildest dreams, and that being offered solo record deals by Sony Classical was the most exciting thing ever. The media, predictably, went looking for something darker beneath the diplomatic language. Some outlets suggested the split had been acrimonious. Fans were devastated. Years later, Jonathan would articulate what had actually happened with characteristic honesty. He explained that Charlotte had raised his confidence to the level where he could go on BGT, and they had made something beautiful together, but that neither of them had been ensemble artists. They had both loved solo performances, and so separating was the natural evolution of what they had built. He said that at the point he had developed the necessary confidence and understood himself better, it felt like time to make the leap. There was no villain in this story. There were just two young people who had grown up enough to know what they each needed to become. In the years that followed, the two rarely spoke. Jonathan acknowledged in later interviews that when you are working hard, you simply do not get the time to maintain those connections, even with people who meant a great deal to you. Two best friends who had first performed together at a teacher's wedding and then stunned the world had drifted into silence. It was not dramatic. It was just the quiet mathematics of adult life, overtaking a teenage friendship. Jonathan launched his solo career in October 2014 with his debut album, Tenor. His first solo album conquered the top spot on the Classical Artist album chart, followed by tours across the UK and the United States. The album showcased Jonathan's growth and the hard work he had put into training his voice. Critics who might have wondered whether his talent was dependent on the duo context now had their answer. It was not. Jonathan Antoine stood entirely on his own. That same year brought another remarkable milestone. Jonathan appeared at the 20th anniversary of Muhammad Ali's Celebrity Fight Night in 2014, benefiting pediatric disease research. He was also personally invited to perform by Placido Domingo at the iTunes Festival, one of the three tenors extending a hand to a young British tenor who had come from nowhere. The endorsement was not trivial. His second album, Believe, followed in August 2016, and his 2020 release, Going the Distance, was recorded with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and became his first U.S. television special, airing on PBS. That album included his first ever recording of Nessun Dorma, one of the most demanding arias in the operatic repertoire, and he delivered with a voice that had matured considerably from a nervous teenager who had once stood trembling on the BGT stage. But success had not erased what had been carved into him during those years of bullying. Around the time of his BGT debut, Jonathan was diagnosed with acute depression, which led to emotional struggles and even caused him to cancel a major performance at the Royal Albert Hall. Canceling a concert at the Royal Albert Hall is not a decision anyone takes lightly. It speaks to how severely the condition affected him. Jonathan has spoken openly about these struggles over the years, refusing to paper over them with the clean narrative of a talent show success story. He became an advocate for mental health awareness, using his public platform to speak honestly about what depression actually feels like from the inside. Mental health and anti-bullying became causes he championed directly, and he co-authored a children's book named Jonathan the Porcupine with author Kathy Gebhardt, focused on self-worth and empathy for young readers. The boy who had been targeted throughout his school years was now writing books to help other children understand they were not alone. That is not a small thing. Then came the physical transformation that his fans noticed gradually, and then all at once. Jonathan had struggled with his weight throughout his life, a struggle inseparable from the emotional wounds of his childhood. In recent years, he underwent a major health transformation, losing around 5 stone, approximately 70 pounds, through consistent lifestyle changes. He has spoken about walking 10,000 steps every day as a discipline that became almost meditative, and about managing a thyroid condition that had complicated his health for years. The same quality that had driven his vocal training, patient, sustained, unglamorous discipline, was applied to his physical well-being. The results were striking, and his fans responded not just to the physical change, but to the honesty with which he shared the process. And then, in April 2022, came a revelation that reframed everything. Shortly after his 27th birthday, Jonathan received an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. He waited until Autism Awareness Day in 2024 to share this publicly, writing on Instagram, "I got my diagnosis in 2022, not long after my 27th birthday, and for a short while fell into it like a daydream. The recontextualization of a life already lived is a scary thing to reckon with, but those things done are already set. There's no going back from here." He added with characteristic thoughtfulness that he still did not know exactly what he had to contribute to the broader discussion, that he was in the process of finding out what the diagnosis meant to him personally, but that perhaps the naivety of that process was itself worth writing down. It was a beautifully honest response to information that many people would have kept private. For Jonathan, privacy on this subject would have felt like dishonesty. And dishonesty, it seems, is simply not something he is built for. The diagnosis explains so much: the intensity of his focus on music from childhood, the difficulty of social connection, the way the bullying had struck at him so deeply, the particular quality of his inner world. He reflected publicly on how vastly different inner and outer worlds can be, describing how we each cultivate inner spaces that filter the external world and generate our own personal lens on reality, and how trying to imagine what lens someone else is looking through is a way of loving both them and yourself. These are not the words of a man who has been simply singing songs. They are the words of someone who has spent years doing genuine interior work. Jonathan is now entering what those around him describe as a powerful new era. His 2026 album, Speaking to You, released on the 27th of March, reflects an artist at ease with who he is, unafraid to be open and excited to let music do what it does best: reach people where they are. The 12-track album includes interpretations of songs ranging from Put Your Head on My Shoulder and The Sound of Silence to Puccini's Donna non vidi mai and U2's I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. It is the work of a man who no longer feels a need to choose between classical and contemporary worlds. He simply inhabits both, because that is who he is. Through his company Antoine Multimedia Limited, Jonathan has directed efforts towards social causes, including support for combating homelessness and animal welfare. He continues to tour. He continues to advocate. He continues to be by all available evidence, exactly what he appears to be, a genuinely unusual human being who found his footing the hard way and has no intention pretending otherwise. What Jonathan Antoine's story ultimately tells us is something uncomfortable and important about how we receive talent. We almost missed him. The judges almost let their first impressions of a nervous, overweight teenager override what was standing right in front of them. His bullies spent years trying to convince him he had no value. A national television audience nearly watched him get dismissed in his opening seconds. And through all of it, the voice was there, patient, extraordinary, waiting. The real story of Jonathan Antoine from BGT is not a story about a singing competition or a record deal or even a remarkable voice. It is a story about what survives when everything else tells you to give up. It is about a boy who found in music the one place in the world where he was not invisible, and who spent the next 14 years making sure that place grew large enough to live in permanently. He is 31 years old. He has a new album out. He is, by his own account, more comfortable in his own skin than he has ever been. That is not the ending of